Hello, and welcome to Historical Fiction with Kviatoslav. Recently, a few other book reviewers, channels that I follow, have been making videos about kind of the idea that young people nowadays don't read as much as they used to there. And I've got some feelings about that as well. I kind of agree, disagree, and to a certain extent there. Channels like Patrick's Book Reviews made a really excellent video about that, and I've seen on Eternal Reading, he made a video about kind of recent YA fiction there and why it's not any good. So it kind of got me thinking because I think I do talk a bit about kind of young adult historical fiction from the 20th century on my channel a bit because it's one of my interests. It's kind of funny, a young adult. I guess I consider myself an old child when it comes to things like that. But I really actually enjoy reading books from the 50s and 60s, especially historical fiction authors. I think there were a lot of really fantastic authors at that time. A few of them that I've talked about before, like Henry Treece is one of my favorites, who wrote a number of novels for teenagers and young people there, set in different periods of history there, and which can be still be enjoyed by adults these days, and I think in particular enjoyed by adults. Or Rosemary Sutcliffe, I recently made a video about her Eagle of the Ninth series there. So I think there was a lot of very high quality historical fiction available. I'm not sure about these days if it's actually available, but I got to thinking about maybe just kind of normal type of fiction there, maybe not specifically historical fiction, but if there were kind of good books available for young people in the 20th century that are not really available now. And again, I don't really have any comparison. I've got zero interest in YA novels and things like that written now from most of the people that I respect, like Eternal Reading has kind of dismissed it, and I think I would probably have the same opinion. But I do have some interesting books. These are kind of books. If you've ever heard of this genre of fiction, from it was I think it was particularly popular. It was created in Britain and the UK there. I think at the beginning of the 20th century, something called Boys' Own fiction. And these were basically kind of adventure stories for young boys. You know, they could be kind of contemporary, sometimes historical, but basically little kind of short stories and collections that were written for boys, kind of usually adventurous, with the young protagonist who would stumble upon a mystery or some kind of action situation, and it was kind of, very up to that plucky individual to solve the mystery. I'm not sure exactly why. I don't think they were particularly well known, for example, in the US there, but I know they were very, very popular in the UK. And they also gave way, of course, to something called Girls' Own fiction, which were kind of adventure stories for young women as well. I used to have a few of these Boys' Own books there that I'd collected over the years, but I've since kind of either sold or given them away. But I do have a few kind of the Girls' Own. The reason I've got the girls' ones is because I've got three daughters, so I kind of hung on to these just in case they would be kind of interested in reading some of these dusty old books of dad's there. And these are books that I've kind of collected from here in Bohemia. Sometimes you'll find these kind of old collections of books that are often kind of sold off in English there. So I've kind of collected these from some schools that I've visited there, and kind of preserved them as kind of little kind of historical documents and so on there. This one is called Mystery Stories for Girls there. I think most of them were these kind of mysteries. They're usually these kind of Nancy Drew types, little mysteries. They're not really mysteries at all, but they're written by a number of authors who you have almost certainly never heard of. There, I'll see. There, I don't, no recognizable names. I'm not even sure if those are the actual names, and they're just very kind of general kind of stories there, about these young girls who usually go to an exotic place, the Highlands, or the Caribbean there, or Africa there, Jamaica, and so on there, and usually get embroiled in some type of, relatively uh, uh, comparatively exciting adventure there. Nothing, where they're put into a little bit of peril, a little bit of danger, and have to overcome the dastardly people. And there's usually kind of a handsome hero sometime somewhere along the lines that they meet. Usually girls, kind of for girls in their teens. Trying to see if I can find a few more pictures there, because and they're all fine. They're nothing special, nothing to kind of write home about. Some of them are a bit more humorous. This one I liked, which was just about a girl who gets involved in a stolen painting there, Jill of 21 Newlands Park. And then there's some other ones, the Adventure in the Highlands, a couple of girls who get caught up in a kind of mystery, in in a hotel in Scotland there, and this one about some jewel thieves in Jamaica there. And as I said, they're all good. They're all interesting. Not going to be anything that you'll particularly remember, but they're nice and entertaining, and that ultimately the good guys are going to win, and all the peril is not really it's all just there for show. You're not going to have any difficult situations or anything that you'd have to worry about. Here's another one, adventure stories there, and these were mostly written in the 50s, 60s. I think they progressed into the 80s as well there. I think this one's a bit later, from 1981. And you've got these kind of general stories. Escape from Thailand, which was actually quite good. It was a story about this and the Second World War. This very young Thai girl finds an American soldier and basically helps him survive and escape there. So it's she takes on a very kind of heroic role, and I said it's quite good. What they would call nowadays empowering for young girls there. And a few of the other stories are good. Love of Augusto, that was one I actually quite liked, because it was set in the 70s in Cyprus there, which would have been right after the invasion of the Turks, who, kind of partitioned Cyprus. And there's this young girl, Dula, whose a donkey gets kind of trapped on the other side of the line, and she has to go to rescue him. So it's really kind of a sweet, story, but it also shows, just how dangerous, young people could be in wartime there. And then it's got some other Wendy's War was a nice one that was set in London during the Blitz there, and talks about a few young girls having to kind of survive. They're being what would they call it? Sent out to the countryside and living with a family that kind of is not very nice to them, and so on there. Beware the Northman. This was, obviously I like that one, because that's some young people who are involved in a dig to steal, and some bad guys who try to steal the kind of Viking artifacts, and it's got a little supernatural element to it, where there's some children, some ghostly children, and so on. So there could be some supernatural elements as well. I said overall, another nice kind of collection there. And of course, my favorite one is this one. Excuse me, Girls' Adventure Stories of Long Ago. Obviously, that one's going to appeal to me the most. I think this is another one. So interestingly, these books were all kind of I noticed they were printed in Czechoslovakia back in the 60s there, so 60s, 70s, and so on, which is kind of funny that we were printing books for the decadent West there. So I'm probably not able to read them, but printing them. And yeah, this one's got some historical adventure stories. The first story is kind of cruddy attempt to introduce some Englishness into the French Revolution. That's just kind of silly. But beyond that, The Wreckers is a nice kind of tale of a young Welsh girl they've got these wreckers, these pirates that try to where is it? They try to encourage ships to crash and kind of loot the ships there. And she's, a nice thing about these is the girls themselves. They obviously have to, outwit the enemies. Jihan of the Forest is probably my favorite. It's much more of a fantasy story set in the times of King Arthur there. But you've got some really great this story where this young orphaned girl, who's generally considered a witch by the people around her, she finds a a young knight, Sir Huon, a French knight there, who was attacked by the local lord bully there, and it's got some local color as well. She kind of nurses him back to health, and I say it's a really great one where it's got the young girl who's, you know, dismissed by everyone, and yeah, a few others, like Lamp for Elizabeth, which is, Florence Nightingale tale, Highland Escape, which was really quite a good one there. I liked that one. It's this young Scottish girl who helps Bonnie Prince Charlie, a girl named Runa who helps Bonnie Prince Charlie kind of escape. And it's all kind of good fun, nothing too deep, nothing to necessarily write home about, but it's all relatively entertaining and kind of good fun there. So there was this kind of good kind of fiction available for in this case for young girls and for young people there. So maybe today just there's just not very much good fiction written for young people. Maybe that's one of the reasons that young people might not be reading as much. So don't know. Thanks for watching.